Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
Hi, I'm Assemblyman Tom Abinanti. Welcome to Assembly Update for the 92nd Assembly District. That's Greenburgh, Mount Pleasant, all of the villages and communities contained in those two towns. Today I have the privilege of interviewing and speaking with a gentleman named Blair Horner. Blair is embedded in the wall in this modern technological era here. Where, I'm in the studio, but he's on Zoom. Welcome, Blair. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me. And as I get beamed in from another planet.
That's right. I know who you are. We've worked together for years. I'd like you to tell the audience who you are, what organization you represent.
Sure. The trick questions first, I see. My name is Blair Horner. You got that right. I'm the executive director of an organization called New York Public Interest Research Group, NYPIRG. We work on a wide range of issues, and a lot of it deals with the Assemblyman.
NYPIRG. That started off, if I remember correctly, when I was a young kid, and it was all volunteers. It was all college kids who wanted to do good things for their community. Is that where it started?
Yeah, I mean, it started with an idea that Ralph Nader had around 1970. Where the theory was that students were very interested in sort of civic affairs. They were worried about particularly the men were concerned about being drafted, sent to Southeast Asia. There had been recent fights and continuing fights over civil rights, women's rights, the environment. The first Earth Day was in 1970. And so it was a way the idea was to channel that youthful activism into policy change. And so public interest research groups were the idea that he had, and they were started to be created across the country starting in the early 1970s, and NYPIRG started in 1973 when you were a wee lad.
Yes, it actually started when I got out of law school, and I went to law school with Donald Ross, who was one of the guys who started New York NYPIRG. But now you guys are classified as a lobbyist, right? I don't see lots of bags of money around to give out to legislators to convince them to vote your way.
If only it were true. You're right about Donald. Donald was the guy who worked with Nader, who came up with the idea of the public interest research groups, and was NYPIRG's first executive director, and had the fortune or misfortune of hiring me back in 1979. This concept is still the same, though. There are 17 colleges and universities across the state, one in Westchester, SUNY Purchase, where students are still involved in internship programs, volunteer opportunities that are plugged into the organization. The board of directors are all college and university students elected from the schools, and they hire staff to add expertise and continuity to the work. And so an old guy like me is around to help manage all of that. But you're right. I mean, under New York state law, if any entity is planning to spend or receive money to lobby in the amount of $5,000 or more, they have to report their activities to the state and are considered lobbyists. So NYPIRG, which is relatively small potatoes to many of the other groups that lobby the state legislature, we do spend over $5,000, and so we report our activities and are registered lobbyists, as I have been since 1984.
Now, you still use a lot of young people from college and a lot of volunteers?
Yeah, the students on the college campuses, every one of the campuses have internship programs, volunteer opportunities that span the gamut of interests, because you want to give an opportunity for all students, no matter what their partisan leaning. And so we run things relatively non-controversial as a small claims court action center, where we train undergraduates to give non-legal advice, procedural advice to use small claims court for consumers, to things like voter registration, to helping to collect needed materials for the hungry and homeless, all the way up to advocacy to fight climate change and any potential cuts to higher education. So it's sort of soup to nuts across the board, and we try to have opportunities for students of any stripe to participate. And in this office, pre-pandemic anyway, we had a full-time internship program where 5 undergraduates were selected each year, and they were trained to be sort of public interest lobbyists to work down at the state capitol. Now it's still all done remotely, although I'm not sure what 2022 will bring yet. But yeah, so young people are really the engine that pulls the NYPIRG train.
As soon as you figure out what 2022 is going to bring us, please let me know. It's, I know it's been a challenge for us as well. We've been very busy in our office. I've never been this busy before. I've been up here 11 years now, and it's been a real challenge because we're trying to serve our constituents. A lot of it is remote. So we have the regular agenda of helping people do the things that they need to get done. And on top of that, we have all of the issues that come out of the pandemic. So it's been really busy. How do you choose your agenda? How do you decide what you're going to concentrate on each year? And if it involves legislation, how do you decide which bills you're going to support, which ones you're going to oppose?
Well, it's more, it's, I guess, maybe more art than science, but it's a combination of, based on 40 years experience, where we think there will be opportunities that are coming up. And sometimes there are opportunities you didn't expect. So we have a broad agenda of environmental, consumer protection, higher education, government accountability issues. We have a broad range of issues. And you have to triage what you think is most important. And so part of it is what we think will be a front burner issue for the legislature. And part of it is what the board of directors of NYPIRG, the students, want. So I'll give you 2 examples. Given the fact that we now have a new governor, and she became governor because of scandal that knocked out her predecessor, we think, based on our experience, that the issue of ethics will be a big issue that the legislature is going to have to deal with and the governor this coming session. So we're organizing ourselves in that way. At another level, some other issue that the board was interested in. The student board wants us to work on and make a priority universal health care. And so we will be, whether or not we think there's a great opportunity for universal health care to pass this year, we don't know yet. But the board wants to put resources, and did in their budget, put resources into us doing more advocacy behind New York Health Act. So it's different sorts of opportunities. And then there's always the stuff that pops up out of nowhere, or things that are even regular. So we expect, for example, we'll be involved, at least to some extent, on how you guys decide to deal with redistricting this year. We know that that's going to have to be dealt with legislatively. Whether or not there's any opportunities for an advocate, we don't know yet. But we'll probably be somewhat involved in that as well, to the extent that we can. So it's sort of all of those things mixed together.
Now, you mentioned ethics. The problem with that's kind of like, apple pie and motherhood. Everybody's in favor of it, but not everybody knows how to make an apple pie, and a lot of people are reluctant to get involved in furthering motherhood. So how do we approach this whole question of ethics? One of the issues has been what kind of an agency do you have to supervise? And somebody came up with this idea, what's called JCOPE. I forget what the initials stand for. But it's been battered back and forth. It was seriously controlled by the governor in the past. I know I have a couple of bills that are pending in the legislature that would prohibit people from the governor's office being placed on JCOPE, and some that would prohibit people from going from JCOPE into the governor's office to try to separate JCOPE and make it more independent. That doesn't, of course, then deal with the issue of, well, the speaker appoints some people and the majority leader appoints some people. And yet I don't know how you do it if the governor and the majority leader and the speaker aren't appointing the people who's going to appoint them. So how do you approach this issue? Maybe you can explain a little bit what JCOPE is and then how you would approach it.
New York State has an ethics watchdog called the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, also known as JCOPE, which was a creature created by Governor Cuomo and the legislature back in the year 2011. It replaced an agency that preceded it, the Commission on Public Integrity, which was also the state ethics watchdog, which was created by then Governor Eliot Spitzer and the legislature, which was preceded by 2 different agencies, one dealing with ethics and one dealing with lobbying. So we've always had some sort of entity. And the fundamental flaw has always been the issue that you just highlighted, which is how do you make sure that the agency is independent of the people that they're supposed to be regulating? And while it's easy to say that that shouldn't happen, people shouldn't regulate themselves effectively, it's hard to do because, as you pointed out correctly, someone has to pick them. And that's where it's always been a problem historically since the first State Ethics Commission was created in 1987. It's always been a problem. And so how do you deal with it? Well, the Joint Commission on Public Ethics right now, the entity that exists, has 14 members on the commission. Eight of them are picked by the legislative leaders. And it's sort of a weird sort of way that those guys are picked. And then the remaining 6 are picked by the governor. But the governor's been able, the former governor, was able to control it. And the first 3 executive directors were people that had worked for the governor and became magically the executive directors of this agency after supposedly a national search that ended up with them finding them in Albany. What a surprise. So they weren't independent. So what do? Well, you can look at other models. If you wanted to really make it independent, I think you need a constitutional change. The state of Hawaii, for example, has its code of ethics enshrined in its state constitution, creates sort of a judicial council that's involved in identifying the candidates that would be on their ethics commission. Now, a constitutional amendment, as you know, takes time. And so what do you do in the meantime? Or what do you do permanently? And so what's the legislative solution? You're left with either identifying some trusted source to pick the people, God knows who they are, or some sort of system that has so many steps in it, it's hard for anybody to influence it directly. So there you would have, a selection committee that was appointed by, let's say, the governor and the legislative leaders, who would then open up applications for anyone to apply to be on the ethics commission. And there would be some restrictions. You could be a lobbyist, you could have worked for the governor, blah, 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 all the things you just said, plus other things. And then that selection committee would pick a certain number out of that group. And then you could have those people, after background checks and stuff, be placed on the commission, let's say 4 of them. And then those 4 pick the remaining 5 out of the pool. So you can come up with some Rube Goldberg type of system that makes it hard for any one person to game it all out to control it, coupled with, maybe a constitutional response where the entity would be protected. Like the Commission on Judicial Conduct is created in the state constitution, and the legislature and the governor pick the members of that commission because they oversee the judicial branch. You could have a mirror image of that. We
have a minute left, and we've gotten deep into the subject of ethics, but it really is very important. Most of the people in government, I'd say 99% of the people in government are there for the right reason, trying to do the right thing. And I've found that most of the lobbyists also, while they represent individual clients, are motivated by trying to make our communities a better place. The problem is you always have, that one bad apple in the basket or in the bushel. And so what do you do about that? So this is a conversation that we're going to continue. And I very much appreciate your weighing in on it today and explaining to us what this is all about. I'm going to invite you back again because I'd like to talk about some of the other issues. I know you're concerned about climate change and all of those others. It's nice to see you again, and I look forward to working with you over this session.
Next month.
Next month, yes.